Chapter 12 Trapped. Caroline's idea had been to go right home from school, check in with Mother, grab a donut or something, and then, when Beth and Eddie were settling down to their homework, slip out of the house with Mother's flashlight and Dad's screwdriver and go to Oldacre's by herself. Now, however, everything seemed to conspire to keep her from getting outside of the house. Mother told her that before she did anything else, she was to clean her room, change the linen on her bed, and put her dirty sheets in the hamper. Caroline had done this as quickly as she could, but it took a long time, and before she could leave her room even, Mother came up to check. She said Caroline had to go through the clothes in her closet as well and sort out clean from dirty. And then, when she had finally found the flashlight and screwdriver and was on her way to the front door, a friend called from school and wanted to talk about the stupidest things, paper dolls of all the country singers, for heaven's sakes. Out the door at last, down the steps. It was really getting cold now in Buckman, and she was glad she had thought to put on Beth's old jacket with the fur trim. The sky was already gray, and Caroline was glad to see, as she crossed the large road bridge at the end of Island Avenue and headed toward Main Street, that the Haffer boys were nowhere in sight. If this was a trick and there wasn't any trapdoor at Oldacre's, she didn't want Wally laughing at her. If he and his brothers were in the store, she'd buy a book, any book, and pretend that's what she'd come for in the first place. When she got to the store, she slipped the flashlight and screwdriver up one sleeve of her jacket and went inside, glad to get out of the chill. When the sun went down in West Virginia, it went in a hurry, as though there were just day and night with not much evening in between. It didn't take long to find the trap door. If you had been coming to Oldacre's bookstore for years and years, you probably wouldn't even notice it anymore. But Caroline's eyes sought it out, and there it was, not too far from the cashier's counter. There were customers ambling about, so Caroline strolled casually toward the back. The store was warm and welcoming, and she wondered why she hadn't been here before. She couldn't believe the large collection of children's books. It reminded her of the school library. There were books that made her laugh, like Howling for Home. There was a large tent for younger children, with many of the favorite picture books she had enjoyed when she was little. Frog and Toad Are Friends, and When the Relatives Came. As soon as the space around the trapdoor was empty, Caroline walked over to see if the lid was screwed or bolted down. Wonder of wonders, there was nothing holding it at all. It was just sitting there over the opening. Her heart began to race. Was it possible that for once in her life, Wally Hatford had been telling her the truth? Now the problem was how to get through the trap door without anyone seeing. Customers called two different men. Mr. Oldacre! So Caroline figured the owners were a young man and his father. Since it was almost dinner time, there were only a few customers in the store, and some of them were leaving. This could be her lucky day, Caroline thought. She hung around, moving slowly among the racks of new calendars, of note paper, and stationery, past the shelves of paperback books and dictionaries, and large flat books with beautiful pictures that people kept on their coffee tables back in Ohio. Well, Mike, I'm going to head home, she heard the older Mr. Oldacre say to the other. I'll set up that sale table, and there will be time tomorrow morning to put the merchandise on it. Okay, then, I'll leave at 6, the younger man said. And after a little more talk with a woman who came in just then, the older man left. Do you have any books with photographs about the way Chinese children live? The woman asked. Have you seen City Kids in China? He suggested. Caroline looked around. No one else was there. She moved quickly over to the trap door and bent down, grasping the edge with her fingers. At first it didn't seem to move, and she was afraid it might be nailed shut after all, but she was relieved to find she could lift it with both hands, and she slid it off to one side. Caroline could see narrow, steep stairs just inside. Before she could think of any reason she should not go, she started down, pulling the lid back over her as she moved down the stairs until she felt it settle into place above her head. She stood very still, heart pounding, the damp, musty smell of earth filling her nostrils, the cold of the ground seeping into her bones. This is what it's like to be buried alive, she thought. Buried Alive, starring Caroline Lenore Malloy. Any minute she expected the trap door above her to open and Mike Oldacre to stare down at her. But as she waited, the sound of footsteps grew louder from the back of the store and passed right over her head. No one lifted the door. Emboldened at last by the talk and laughter, the comings and goings above her head, Caroline turned on the flashlight and directed it to the bottom of the steep, narrow steps as she went down. There were cobwebs everywhere. Goosebumps rose on her arms. She was the daughter of a kind king, but had an evil stepmother. And while her father was out of the country, the stepmother had her put in the dungeon, hoping she would die before her father returned. At this point, Caroline knew a sob should escape her lips. The books always said so, and Caroline practiced at giving out soft little sobs that would not be heard from above. Just tiny baby sobs as she moved on around the cellar, brushing cobwebs away from her face. There were a few boxes on the dirt floor of the cellar, some wooden window frames standing on end, assorted junk, but mostly the place seemed unused. Any books stored here for long would become damp and moldy, Caroline was sure. She started in one corner, working her way along, moving a box here, a crate there. The cellar wasn't as large as the floor above, so it did not take long for her to cover every foot of space with the beam of her flashlight. She was looking for bones, a piece of a skeleton sticking up from the floor perhaps, something hidden that only Mr. Hatford and the Oldacres knew about. But there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Could they have dug up the bones and taken them somewhere else? Thrown them away? She began looking in all the boxes, but the boxes were empty. What a disappointment! Well, Wally didn't have to know she had come. If he ever told her again about the bones in the cellar of Oldacre, she'd just say, "Ha!" and not listen. But right now, she was cold, and Mother was having chicken and dumplings for supper, her favorite. So Caroline went back to the stairs again, climbed up just far enough so that her hands would reach the trapdoor. This would be the hard part. It was a lot easier getting into the cellar unseen than it would be getting out. She waited until the footsteps and voices went to the back of the store again. When she felt quite sure that no one was up there by the trapdoor, she put both hands against it and shoved. But nothing happened. She frowned. Caroline turned on the flashlight to be sure it was the door she was pushing against. Then she turned off the light once more, stuck it again up the sleeve of her jacket, and braced the palms of her hands against the underside of the trapdoor. Caroline pushed with all her strength. The door didn't budge. There must be a customer standing right there on top.